Okay, so we're going to get started with exercise 214. We're changing it up a little bit. We're going to start working on kind of the next phase. They dovetail together rather nicely, but we're going to start working on exercise 214, which is a skill builder for your assignment 203. So we're going to be ultimately getting to assignment 203 over the next several lectures. I'm going to take a second and talk about assignment 203 first, so that we can kind of go over what's kind of happening, what's expected about it, etc. You're going to be designing a skyscraper, and that skyscraper needs to fit on a 100-foot by 200-foot by 808-foot lot. So I'm expecting it to be 808 feet tall. I picked 808 feet for a reason, because when we do scaling down and ultimately make the little models, it's about the right size, etc. So it's a rather tall building. Just kind of be aware of your background. It is larger than the building we're going to create today. So you're going to do a separate new building for your assignment. So unlike the last class or the last several classes where we were basically working on the topo lines and you just, when you were done, you were done, this one you're going to be creating a whole separate building on your own. So we're going to build that building, and I'm expecting it to have some twists and bumps and bulges and that sort of thing. That's what it's about. And so we'll get to that. We're going to use that as a block reference in the city of San Francisco. So I have a lot picked out in San Francisco. Not that it is a vacant lot, but I created it for you to have a vacant lot. And you're going to stick your building on that lot and then be able to do some renderings in context. Part of those renderings will involve creating skies and having clouds in the sky and creating basically a photorealistic rendering of the sky and having a sun system and whatever. We're going to talk through all of those steps and being able to do it. So we're going to work a lot with environment. And so you'll ultimately be doing renderings that, it'll be 3 renderings that are hopefully at least 2 of which are at ground level perspective. So as if you were walking toward it along the street, you'd do the rendering and you'd see the sky in the background. And again, all of that I'll walk you through. So there'll be 3 renderings. Separate and apart from that, there's a few other things that we're going to create. One of which will be a 3D print G-code file that will allow you to go over to the 3D printer lab and actually make a little model of your building. I'm not setting it up as a required part to actually print it and give me the print, but I will set it up so that you have to show me the G-code as if you were ready to go print. I would encourage you to make a time and actually print it and experience that and whatever. It's just logistically really challenging for me to get all of you to print it in a certain amount of time and then have you turn it in and grade it, etc. So I would strongly encourage you to set up the time and do it. I would love to walk you through how to do it. Well, we're going to walk through in class how to create the G-code file, but then to actually go over, teach you guys how to use the 3D printer and get it to work. The other thing that I can't promise is that the 3D printers will work the whole time. So sometimes they go down, sometimes they jam, etc. And for anybody that's done 3D prints, you know that those are kind of the problems with 3D printers. That's why they're not as good as being production. We had 2 machines that were pretty much bulletproof, both of which have since died. So go figure. So as good as those machines were, we're down those machines now. But anyway, we are going to hopefully have all of you make one of these as an end result. But that particular part won't be graded. So you'll turn in the G-code, that will be graded, but the actual physical print won't be. The other part that we're going to work with is that you're going to learn how to unroll the surfaces of your skyscraper such that you could actually cut it out of paper and then fold it together and glue it together. So I'm going to have you create a laser cut file as if it were folded apart, and then if you glued it together. And I have samples of it in my office. Again, you'll be graded on not the actual physical model. You'll be graded on did you create the outlines and were you ready to laser cut it, as opposed to having to actually laser cut it and put it together. So you're saved the physical part of this particular assignment, but you're going to have to do all the prep work as if you were going to do it. And that'll be part of the grade. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. So again, there's a fair amount of lead time on this one. It's due on Monday, the 4th of November. So we've got a little bit of time. That is because, of course, you don't have all the skills to do it yet. So we will cover all of that in the coming couple lectures. So today we're going to work on just kind of building form and figuring out how to create the form of your skyscraper in the first place. That is definitely the wrong handout. There we go. I'm on the right one. And so we're going to kind of work through this strategy. Today we're going to have a base of 200 feet by 100 feet, and our overall height is going to be 600 feet. So same base size, but it's not quite as tall. So I went ahead and I opened up Rhino. I have a blank large object inches template set up for myself here. And we're going to start by just kind of building out and thinking about how to create these buildings in the first place. So in its most simple sense, we could go in to our box corner to corner, start at 0, 0, say at 100 feet, comma, 200 feet. Oops, helps if I type it correctly. There we go. And our overall height would be 600 feet. And that would be our most basic building form. There it is. Not particularly exciting. We're going to get to making it more exciting. So if we have that kind of a building, we could certainly start to work with it. We could transform it. Or we could start with kind of creating lines to give us guidelines and then manipulating those. So for example, I could do another building next door. Let's go over. And this time, instead of doing a box corner to corner, I'm doing a rectangle. Oh, I forgot a comma there. And I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, okay, well, what if I cut off one of the sides? So let me turn on my midpoint snap. Let's say I cut that side like that and I clipped it. We'll take this, we'll trim that piece off, and then I'll take these and join them together. And then maybe I'll create another rectangle. We'll move this, so I'm typing move, V for vertical, and we'll go up maybe 300 feet. And maybe that stays like that, and then maybe I'll take this one, vertical by 600 feet. Oops. Don't need this one. And then maybe these, I take this, and I loft those together. Now here, the joint matters. So I want this joint to actually be there for that side. And so it's twisting. And maybe that's twisting too much. Maybe I need to adjust it a little bit more. Maybe I will... let's see, let's come over here just a little bit on the corner here. Let's go over. There we go. Let me join those. And then let me loft these two. That makes it a little bit cleaner, so they're not twisting as much. So I've given myself a little corner there. And then we'll take this piece, and we could loft that together. And again, I want this seam to happen there. And so maybe it looks like that. So in this scenario, to get the top and the bottom, I would need to take the curve, and then I can patch it. I could do a surface from 3 or 4 corner points too. That would work, but it depends again on how many corner points you have. Patch is pretty easy, so there's one more. We'll patch that one, and the U and V spans I edited to be 2 and 2, and that creates the top and the bottom. So it's got a little bit more flair to it. I could take those in the same capacity here. Copy those. That's the next set. I could, I don't know, let me, clip the other side here. Trim those. joined. And then I could say, okay, let's take these, let's loft those. And yeah, that should work. And then I could take this and this one, and I could loft those together. Like that. I'm paying a lot of attention to my seams to make sure I hit my seams correct. So maybe it's like that. So I'm starting to manipulate the shapes, and I'm doing this by creating a series of control curves and then manipulating them. The thing about it, though, is frequently you're limited to, okay, well, I have these control curves, it's based on those certain levels, and then I just make my adjustments, and it's always straight in between. Sometimes you actually want to start to manipulate your object in a little bit different manner. So let me take this piece again, and let me bring it over here, and let's say I want to just work to manipulate this particular piece. Now, if I want to manipulate that piece, I could come over and turn my, I think it's the control points on. I don't have enough control points on that one yet. So I really can't manipulate it by too much. So instead, I can use what's called a cage edit, and that's where this whole thing was going. And I can create that by typing in cage edit or going under, I think it's under transform, and then cage editing, cage edit. And so I can either I type in cage edit or I select that, and then it says first to select the captive object. So this is the object that's contained inside this edit. So in this case, it would be this building. I'll go ahead and press enter when done. Select control object. I'm going to use a bounding box. So around the outside of my building here, I'll click on bounding box. Then the rest of these options are just fine. So the coordinate system will use the world. My cage parameters. I'm going to keep this first one really simple, and we'll talk through what this means. So my X point count, I'm going to say 2. My Y point count, I'm also going to say 2. And my Z point count, I'm going to say 2. When I'm done with those, and they all say 2, 2, and 2, the degrees have also changed to 1, 1, and 1. I'll explain what degrees mean in just a second. I can go ahead and press enter. Region to edit global, that's the default, that's fine. And so when I do that, you see that I now have control points on the top. There's 4 there, and there's 4 at the bottom. Do you guys see those points? There, I'll highlight them up. I can then manipulate those points. So I could take, say, those 4 points. Let me use my center snap to do this. Oh, come on, let me snap to the center. Doesn't like me. Let's go over like that, and let's rotate this whole top by, say, 15 degrees. And so that then manipulates this shape by 15 degrees, and it causes that building to twist. Let's take this, and let's explore what some of my other options would be. So in this case, the sides just stayed straight. Let me take this piece, and I'm going to once again do a cage edit. So I'll type in cage edit. My control object is going to be a bounding box. My coordinate system is going to be a world. The X point count I'm going to leave at 2. The Y point count I'm going to leave at 2. The Z point count, however, I'm going to change from 2 to 3. So I change that. I'm going to leave the degrees set as 1, 1, and 1 again. When I press enter here, you're going to see one more global. You're going to see that I get a third set of control points. So you see in the Z now I have 1, 2, and 3. This is going to allow me to select the middle of the object this time instead of just the top, and I could rotate that one by 15 degrees. So let's do, I'm going to just rotate it from that point by 15, and you can see that the whole building kinks out, keeping the top and the bottom straight. Now each of these so far I could have done with a loft. They're not too complicated. Let's take this same object and do it again. And we're going to change that degree option. So there you go. So you see I'm just stacking these up as I'm going through and experimenting with them. You're going to do something similar. You're going to create a lot of shapes today until you decide which one you like the most. So I'm going to take this one. I'm going to go through that cage edit again. So cage edit again, bounding box again, world again. Now here, The x is still going to be 2, the y is still going to be 2, the z is still going to be 3, but I'm going to leave the degree of 1, 1, and I'm going to change the z degree here to be 2. So everything's the same except that z degree. I'll press enter, region to edit global, enter, etc. So let me take the same 4 points, the same middle points, and I'm going to rotate them again from this corner by 15 degrees. So everything I did was the same. But now this time, instead of having a hard kink there, it's because this is now a two-dimensional curve, it's now arcing instead. So I'm able to make a smooth curve there instead of a hard curve there. So just by changing that degree. The third degree curve, we could switch to the third degree curve, is going to give us results that won't unroll flat. And I'll show you that in a second so you can see it. But generally speaking, we try to stay away from those. So there's our first set there. Let me go ahead and copy this again. And we'll bring this one over. I'm going to do a cage edit. Bounding box, world. I'm going to up my point count. So we're going to say 3, 3, 4. And I'm going to change this degree to 2, this degree to 2, and this degree to 3. Okay, so I have all those set. I'll go ahead and go to global. There we go. So you see now I suddenly have a lot more control points that I can work with. So I could take this group and I could do the same rotate. Rotate. Let me turn on my point snap so I can snap to these points. And I can say, okay, this is going to go, I'm only going to do 5 degrees this time, so it's not quite as extreme. Well, let's do 10. There we go. And I could take those, and let's do -10. And so now the building has this little S shape to it. But I can also say, let me take this point, and sometimes you have to see this in a different view. Let me do ghosted so I can see. There's my other control point. So I'll take these two. I can then move them, and I can have one side bulge out. Let me go to shaded like that. See how that side bulges out? This side, however, curves in 2 directions. So it's kind of like a globe. If you were to unroll a globe, or let's do an orange. You can't unpeel an orange without breaking the peel somewhere. You can't just suddenly make it flat. So if we were going to create this as an unrollable surface that we could laser cut, this would never work. Could we 3D print this shape? Absolutely. So you just have to be aware of what kind of methods you could ultimately do. If you end up creating a building that has a bulge like this, we'll do a simplified version for the unroll in terms of the assignment. Today I want you to experiment. Feel free to kind of play around with this stuff. I could take these 3 points here. Let me switch back into that ghosted. Sometimes you have to do that to be able to pick these. And I could move them out here. And so now the building's bulging in 2 different directions like that. Sorry. Go back to shaded. There we go. Now the thing about it is, I don't have to be limited to just starting with this rectangle. So I could start with this shape that I created. Let me go ahead and join it together so it's a closed poly surface. Let me copy it. And we'll drop it right there. And I could do the same transformation to this. So I could go into Cage Edit. I could say Bounding Box, World. I'm going to drop this down again. And I'll go ahead and hit Enter, and then Global. And now I could take this and I could say, okay, let's take these and rotate them by -10. And let's take these and rotate them by, say, 10. And now I can manipulate that building such that it goes in and has those arcs. Okay? So essentially, I have flexibility when it comes to whatever I want to do with the shape. So I can create the shape first, then perform a cage edit. I don't have to create the cage edit. I could do a building this way. It really doesn't matter. It's a matter of personal preference and design. I'm going to change this a little bit. Let me do this at, that was not what I wanted. I'm just going to keep that building slightly rotating, like that. I'm going to work with this particular building going forward for now. So let me go ahead and copy it over. I'm going to kind of isolate it over here. And then I'll take all of these buildings and I'll put them on their own layer. So let's call this building trials. And I'll right click and say change object layer. And then we can turn off those, and we're now down to this is my final building. This is the one I like. And I'm not saying that this is a particularly good building. You create your own building and have it look the way you want it to look. So now the next piece of this is we're going to work through creating the floors for this building and or the elevator core shaft that goes through the building. So to create the cores for this building, I'm going to go ahead and let me start working this. I'm going to call Skyscraper. I'm going to create a new sublayer for floors, a new sublayer for skin, meaning the outside, and a new sublayer for ceilings. Okay, so let me make the floors layer active, and actually I should take this and put it on the skin layer. There we go. And to create the floors, I'm going to create a rectangle. It'll just be a rectangular plane, corner to corner, that is larger than my building footprint. So I'll look at it in the top view. Usually that's easiest. And just make sure that this is larger than my building footprint. There it is. So if I'm creating these floors, I need to know at where do these floors occur. And part of the reason I gave you the size is so that we can define these relatively easily. So the floor-to-floor height is going to be 16 feet, but the first floor, the lobby floor, is going to be 24 feet. So I'm going to go ahead and take this plane, I'm going to copy it, V for vertical, and it's going to go up by 24 feet. So I'll type in 24 feet. That gives me my first floor. I could then take that floor and I could copy it, V for vertical, and this one would be 16 feet. And then I could do 32 feet. You guys get where this is going, right? Now that's a lot of work. So the alternative there would be to take this first floor and I'm going to do an array. So the array, number in the x direction, this is like that curtain wall that we did. Number in the x direction will be 1, number in the y direction will be 1, and number in the z direction is going to be, I think it's 37, for 37 floors. I'll go ahead and hit enter. Z spacing or first reference point. I know that it's going to be 16 feet between these, so I could just type in 16 feet. And when I do that, I'm going to get a little preview here that's going to let me see what does it look like. And yeah, it looks like I got one all the way at the top. I don't need that one at the top, so I could change the number here to just 36 so that I end up with one less than the top of the building. So again, this was all set up by math so that you guys have the numbers of these floors and how much space is between the floors, etc. So now that I have that, I can go ahead and press enter. And we can see that I have all of those floors in the building. It's time to make those floors the same size as the building because obviously the building changes as it goes up. So I'm going to do a trim. I'll take my skin of the building here. I'll go ahead and type in trim. And then I will work my way down the outside of the building like this. It's a lot of work to click each of these, so I can select them and do larger groups. I don't encourage you to do all of them at once, though it probably will work. Sometimes it causes Rhino to crash, so do little groups as you work your way all the way down to the building. Now this bottommost one, I already actually have a floor. I created the floor in the first place, so I'm just going to delete that one. And so if I was to turn off the skin, we'd see all of the floors, the floor plates, represented here. So now it's time to do all of the ceilings. So we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to think about where the ceilings are placed. There's a reason that the ceilings are different than the floors, and that is because in a building like this, there is space in between the ceiling and the floor where the utilities go. The lights, the ductwork, all the stuff of the building, the structure of the building, etc. So I've given us 4 feet in there of space for those kinds of things to happen, the structure, the ductwork, and all that sort of thing. So same strategy, I create a rectangular plane corner to corner larger than my building, and we'll start by just moving it vertically. So I'll type in move, V for vertical, and this first one is going to go up by 20 feet because the first floor to floor was 24 feet. So I'm going to go up by 20 feet, and that'll create the first option. From here up, it's still every 16 feet because I set the position right. So if I went up 16 feet, I'd be 4 feet below, going all the way up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that array again. Number in the x direction would be 1, number in the y direction is 1, number in the z direction is 36, and my z spacing is again 16 feet. I'll go ahead and hit enter, and I should be able to preview this to say yes, it's pretty good. In this case, though, I need an extra one. So I need 37 because I need the ceiling up here at the very top of the building. So I changed the number to 37. So there they all are. I can go ahead and hit enter. All of those are now on the ceiling layer because that was my active layer. And I can go ahead and do the same trim. I'll select the building skin. I'll go ahead and type in trim. And we'll get rid of small groups until we're done with all of the ceilings. So now if I were to turn off the skin, we'd see essentially like double floors, where this would be the space in between that you could inhabit, and this would be the space for the structure and the building systems. So the next piece of this would be to actually punch an elevator core through the building. So the elevator cores tend to be straight unless you have a really fancy elevator that goes on a diagonal or something. So we're going to go ahead and create that part. So let me, using the skyscraper layer, I'll create a new sub-layer for core. I'll make that active. And I'm going to set up the core using my top view. And the reason I'm using my top view is you can see how the walls shift by floors here, but we can clearly see the part of the building that's just straight up and down. I want the core to go through that part of the building. So I'll go ahead with my box corner to corner, and I'll start it somewhere in here. So I would do that at 30 feet by 30 feet. So I'm going to do negative 30 feet, comma, negative 30 feet, because I wanted it to go in that direction. And then I'll switch over into my perspective view. Now the elevator core is typically a little bit taller than the building, so it's going to go up onto the roof. And by the elevator core, I mean elevators and stairs. I'm not going to make you actually model out the stairs, don't worry. But it's elevators and stairs, and it's the services that go up through the building. So in this case, we'll do it at maybe 610 feet, something like that, 612 feet. So let's go ahead and type 612 feet for height. And there is that elevator core going through the building. If I were to turn the skin back on, there we go, now we can see it punching all the way through the building. So I need to make that transparent so that I can see through it. So I'm going to take that elevator core, and I'm going to go ahead and explode it. And I'll hold down the Control key and deselect the top. Oops, it would help if I actually deselected the top. There we go. Not the back side. Let's try that again. Control key, deselect just the top. Here we go. Then I'll type join. So I exploded, deselected the top, and then rejoined together. And I did that so it's easy to select the core without the top on it. I could take the top and just delete it to look inside it, or if I need it ultimately, I could put it on its own layer and turn it off, or I could just type hide, which makes it go away temporarily. Now I need to trim out every one of those floors with this elevator core. So the easiest way to do it is to actually align your view such that you're looking straight down into the elevator shaft like that. right about there. And then go ahead and type trim. And you can click your way down as if the elevator was going down through all of those floors. I'm giving my mouse a workout here. And there we go. And I made it to the bottom of that elevator shaft. So now I want the top to come back on. So we'll go ahead and type show, and that will bring the top back. So I have the skin, I have all of the floors, I have all of the ceilings, and I have that elevator core that goes all the way through. So those are the components of my building. It's now time to actually set up a directional light and or some materials. Do I even talk about materials on here yet? Hold on. Yeah. So we're going to apply some basic materials to this particular building. On the course website, under today's exercise, here we go, I have two skyscraper materials, a dark skyscraper glass and a light skyscraper glass. These are fake materials that kind of mimic what a skyscraper looks like in terms of the reflections and stuff. You're more than welcome to download and use one of those materials. Alternatively, because we have the new version of V-Ray, we can experiment with what types of glass are available to us in there. But we need to set up a few things about the environment first. And so you guys remember back to this part of it. I'm going to create a layer for environment. I'll create a sublayer under environment for light. And I'll create another sublayer under environment for infinite plane. There we go. And so on the infinite plane layer, I'll go ahead and click on the V-Ray infinite plane tool. It's this one. And that gives me some ground. Notice that it's over here. That's okay. It's still going to come out past. It's infinite. This is just representing the object itself. On the light layer here, I'll give myself a little box as a guide, and then we'll use the basic directional light, this one. And then I'll delete the box so that I have a light shining down on my object. That's good. Now it's time to work through some materials. So let's open the V-Ray Asset Editor here. I'm going to go to Materials. We'll expand out to the left. I'll look at concrete. Let's look at the concrete flooring here. So maybe I like that floor. We'll go ahead and drag it over into my materials list. There's the concrete floor there. I'm going to right-click on the concrete floor and say Apply Material to Layer, and it's going to be the Skyscraper Floors layer, like that. Now maybe when it comes to the ceiling, I want something a little bit different on the ceiling here. I'm not sure I really want wallpaper on the ceiling. Let's do the wall paint fine grain white. I'll drag that one over. There it is. I will right click on it and say apply to layer, and this is going to be on the ceiling layer. The core, I don't know, maybe I want the core to be back to concrete. Let's see what concretes we have here. Let's try that concrete simple. All right, that'll work. I'll right click on it and say apply to layer, and this is going to be the core. So the last piece was the skin. So let's see what glass is available to us in the V-Ray options here. And again, I'm not sure that any of these options are going to work that well. we could try, let's try the glass tinted black. Go ahead and drag that one over. I'll right click on it and say apply material to layer, and we'll put that on the skin layer. Alternatively, I could open one of those light or dark skyscraper materials. If we downloaded those, I can do that by clicking on the import VR matte file. And then in the dialog box here that pops up, that's hidden conveniently behind my asset editor. There we go. I'll go onto my flash drive. I already have those saved on my flash drive. You guys would save it on your flash drive. Let me go into my glass folder, and there's my skyscraper dark and light. I'll do light, and we'll go ahead and open that one up. And there it is. You can tell it's a little bit different from a reflective standpoint, and I could apply it to that. I'm going to try the tinted black first, see what happens, and then we'll come back to the other one and see which one we like a little bit better. So I have the materials applied, and it's now time to set up a view for myself. The other thing that if I were to get closer to the horizon here and try to do a rendering instead of looking down on it, I would want to go back into my V-Ray asset editor, go to the gear icon for settings, go to environment, and just change the background from black to white. So we come over here and change it to white, and then we'll go ahead and zoom in and perform a rendering. So I'm going to click the little teapot, and we'll take a look at the rendering. And so it's okay. It's not the best. The glass certainly looks very black. Maybe I'll try the other material on it, and we'll see what happens. Put that on the core. And it looks pretty close. So once this is done, I'll go ahead and do my, I'll save this, and this will be what I'll post for today. Make sure you do save this, because next class we're going to continue with it. I'm going to show you more about how to texture map with the glass on it. Once we get the environment in, you'll see a lot more out of it. So make sure you find one that you like. Experiment today. This is your chance to experiment. If you get to the point where you feel like you really like an object, maybe make the one that you'll use for your assignment 203. Because you've got the time to work on it. Next class, we're going to be creating a sun and sky system, and I'll show you guys how that kind of plays out. All right, any questions? No? All right, I'll let you guys start working.